Good morning. Welcome to today's Women in Government series in celebration of AAPI Heritage Month. I'm John Luntz, Editorial Director at City and State, which is partnering with Spectrum on this event series to highlight the diversity of New York's many different communities. City and State is steadfastly committed to diversity. We've marked AAPI Heritage Month for years with our Power of Diversity Asian 100 list, which this year reflects a remarkable increase in representation in both the state legislature and the New York City Council. Topping our list this year is Representative Grace Meng, who we've been covering for years, including on one of our first ever 40 under 40 lists back when she was serving in the State Assembly. Today, we'll hear from a handful of New York's most distinguished Asian American leaders about the key issues they're facing. But first, I'll turn it over to Rodney Capel, Vice President of State Government Affairs at Charter Communications. Rodney?
Thank you, John. Good morning to everyone. My name again is Rodney Capel, and I'm Spectrum's Vice President for Government Affairs here in the New York City region. Thank you all for joining us today. First, thank you to our partners at City and State for assisting with today's webinar. And thank you to our leaders here in New York State for joining us as well. It is my honor to represent Spectrum as a partner of this morning's event and to help celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. As the leading provider of TV, internet, phone services in this area and in this unique area as New York City, Spectrum knows firsthand the importance of diversity and inclusion in all aspects of our business. Our vision is to leverage the full diversity of our people and our partners to make a meaningful difference for our customers, company, and communities. In addition, Spectrum works together with a variety of organizations that do impactful, meaningful work for our communities and neighborhoods while we're doing our part to bridge the digital divide. One important and unique way that we do that in New York City is our 40 Spectrum Learning Labs located at nonprofits and community organizations throughout the city. Each lab comes fully equipped with state-of-the-art computers and other equipment, all powered by Spectrum high-speed internet service. And I'm proud to say that of those labs, 5 of them served Asian American communities in Manhattan and Queens in collaboration with the Chinese American Planning Council, whose CEO and president you will hear from in a few minutes, the Korean Community Services of Metropolitan New York, Chaya Community Development Incorporation, and the South Asian Fund for Education, Scholarship, and Training. Most recently, we were proud to announce the expansion of the city's Big Apple Connect program, which provides free internet and cable TV for more than 300,000 people who live in participating New York City Housing Authority developments. Here at Spectrum, we are happy to support these initiatives and bring technology resources to those in need. And we remain committed to advancing diversity and inclusion throughout our company. And one example of that is today's event. I'm very proud to be a part of this discussion, and I'm also proud of Spectrum has sponsored the Women in Government series for the 3rd consecutive year and continues to promote and support key events such as this, showcasing our commitment to the necessity for this important dialogue. Speaking of leaders in this community, I would like to introduce my colleague, Virginia Zigras, Vice President of Legislative Affairs for Charter Communications, who will bring a good friend of ours and an advocate for not only her constituents, but the entire Asian diaspora, U.S. Representative Grace Meng. Take it away, Virginia.
Thanks so much, Rodney, and thanks for that introduction. Today, I have the absolute honor of introducing our keynote speaker, someone you all know and love, Congresswoman Grace Meng. During her time in Washington, Congresswoman Meng has been a fierce advocate for expanding opportunities for women and communities of color. To combat the rise in hate and violence that increased during the coronavirus pandemic, she passed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act into law, and she's also taken the first step to creating a National Museum of Asian Pacific American History and Culture here in Washington, D.C. She also has the very important role serving as the vice chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. We are absolutely thrilled to have her here with us today to share some of her thoughts. Thank you for being here today, Congresswoman. And with that, I'd love to let you take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia, for the kind introduction, to John, to Rodney, and everyone at City and State and Spectrum for including me in today's event and for consistently honoring and including leaders in our community. I too want to wish everyone a happy Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And each year during this month of May, it's such a pleasure to celebrate the many ways in which our community has shaped America into the country that it is today. Growing up, there was so little about our community's history, from accomplishments to the trauma that our ancestors faced, was not really taught in our textbooks. At most, it was a blurb, a sentence or two, and I really learned most of AAPI history when I was an adult or taking elective courses in college. Throughout our nation's past, accomplishments and leaders in countless industries, from scientific discoveries to economic development to social justice movements, these accomplishments have often been forgotten or ignored in the greater narrative of what is our American story. And this lack of education about the history of our community can allow misconceptions and misinformation to flourish. People oftentimes don't view Asian Americans as true Americans. We are perpetual foreigners and outsiders. And without a teaching of complete history, there's a real sense that we do not belong here. I want to acknowledge some of my colleagues who are working at the city and state level for the work that they're doing. I know Assembly Member Grace Lee and Senator John Liu are working to include AAPI history in our school curriculum throughout New York State. To our Deputy Mayor, Maria Torres Springer, thank you to the mayor and the city for making improvements and including more AAPI history in our city school curriculum. And we can't forget that symbolism is important too. Growing up, I was excited to celebrate holidays such as Rosh Hashanah and having the day off, but we never got to have holidays like Lunar New Year off. And in recent years, we worked with our communities and we were able to get school holidays for holidays like Lunar New Year and for Eid. We are still working with the city and state to get holidays off for Diwali, for example. And I want to acknowledge my colleague in government, Assemblywoman Jennifer Rajkumar, working on this at the state level, and council members Linda Lee and Shekhar Krishnan at the city level. And I'm working on the federal level to also include Diwali as a federal holiday. As mentioned before, I'm excited to lead the effort in taking the first steps in creating a future Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander museum in our nation's capital. This museum will not only teach our own community, but all communities about our community's contributions to this nation and the importance we continue to play in its collective strength. This was legislation that I passed in my first few years in Congress. And finally, last year, President Biden signed my bill into law. But we know that it takes time. I'm grateful for leaders in our country like the late Congressman John Lewis, who first introduced his bill to create a National Museum of African American History in 1988. He is someone who spent nearly 3 decades fighting for the story of African Americans to be memorialized in a physical space. And so while this process can be very slow, I'm grateful for the constant and early support and solidarity shown by my colleagues in leaders and communities, such as the Black Caucus and the Hispanic Caucus in Washington, D.C. and Congress. And, when I first got elected to the New York State Assembly, I was the only Asian American elected from that state. I could not obviously form my own Asian caucus in the state legislature because I was the only one. But I was grateful for the allyship and the inclusiveness shown by my colleagues who created the Black, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, and Asian caucus to work together on behalf of all of our communities. So sharing our experiences and celebrating our country and city's diversity allows us to learn from each other and to build a more unified future. There is so much progress. So much progress has been made, but there's so much more work to be done. As was mentioned earlier, just 13 years ago in Congress, for example, there were only 7 Asian American members of Congress. This year, there are 21 members. So it's very exciting. And in the city and the state levels, we have seen those numbers increase as well. So thank you so much to everyone on this webinar for the great work that you do in both leading and advocating for our community and also building bridges with other communities as we forge ahead for a stronger and healthier New York City. Happy AANHPI month to all of you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Thank you. You see where we're so proud of you, and thank you for your partnership throughout the years. I'm going to now go to the next portion of our program. It is my pleasure to turn over this next part to a good friend and partner to our charter family. Wayne Ho is the president and CEO of the Chinese American Planning Council, the nation's largest Asian American social services agency. Wayne has been recognized nationally as one of the most important voices and leaders on issues impacting not only AAPI issues, but the crucial need for social services to be fully supported to create a fairer and more just city and state. Please join me in welcoming my good friend, Wayne Ho.
Thank you, Rodney. I appreciate the very kind introduction, and thank you, Congresswoman Meng, for your leadership. So it's my pleasure at this time to be the moderator for the next 2 portions of our event. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. The first is we will have an interview with Deputy Mayor for Economic and Workforce Development, Maria Torres Springer. I see her camera's just come on. So welcome, Maria. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you, Wayne.
So I think we should let people know, to be completely transparent, because I believe in transparent government, Maria and I have known each other for over 20 years, going back to graduate school. But my first question to you is, I want to take a little step back, which is, when you were growing up in the Bay Area, did you imagine that you would become one of the first 2 Asian American deputy mayors for the city of New York?
That my answer to that one would be a resounding no. I think in many ways the story of many New Yorkers is that you have a set of aspirations for what you might want to accomplish in life. For many, there may not have been a person or a model or an image, unfortunately, that you could latch onto, but this city has become the type of place where, even despite that, one is able to try to reach for that dream. And that has certainly been the gift of this city for me, and it's something that I take very, very seriously every day in this role at City Hall.
Yeah, and in your role, you're responsible right now for spearheading the administration's efforts to strengthen and diversify the economy, investing in emerging industries, supporting small businesses, as well as connecting New Yorkers to sustainable jobs. And that's become more important as we're coming out of the pandemic. So could you share just some of the priorities that you've been working on right now that you're proud of?
Absolutely. Well, I have the great fortune of having been able to come back to government. So I've worked now for the last 3 mayors, and for each of those periods of time that I've been in government, the city had faced some sort of crisis, whether that was right after 9/11, whether that was the Great Recession, Hurricane Sandy. And since this administration took office, we obviously have had to address not just a global pandemic and its economic fallout, but a number of myriad challenges exacerbated by the pandemic. So when you mentioned what we're focused on, I would say first and foremost, what is top of mind for me is that if we are to recover, our job, my job, isn't just to stand back up the city that existed before the pandemic. It's really about thinking how it can be a new type of city, a more just city, a more inclusive city, and a recovery whose arc bends more towards justice than previous recoveries. And I have the great fortune of being able to do that, whether it's economic development, small business, issues of public health, issues of workforce, with incredible partners. Most of the deputy mayors are women. We are women of color. And as you mentioned, I'm one of two, the first AAPI deputy mayors in this city. And so while we each have our own portfolios, the good thing and the critical thing for the effective delivery of any of these services or programs is that we work together as collaboratively as possible. And I do think that comes a little bit, or in large part, from the fact that we bring a type of lived experience that allows us to work on the level of purpose versus ego.
And you've mentioned lived experience. So you were born in Northern California, and you spent 4 years of your childhood in the Philippines, and then you did go to college and then grad school on the East Coast. So how did some of those experiences shape the work that you've been doing now in the administration?
No, thank you for asking that. Well, like many immigrant families, my family really struggled to make ends meet when I was a child, and we relied on a Section 8 voucher and a food stamp. And the story that I've told many is that when I left for college, so when I went to Yale, my dad put me on a plane. He had cleared out his entire bank account. And so the $200 that he gave to me when I left for college, and I've tried to fashion a life and a career that doesn't squander those $200, and really think about what it means for government to, because growing up, we were on the receiving end of either good government service delivery or bad government service delivery. And so I think about that every day in terms of the role that we have here, which fundamentally isn't about programs, it's not about RFPs, it's not about the alphabet soup of all of the things that we obsess about in government. It has to be about the people who we are either helping or lifting up, or we're creating more barriers. And so on my good days, it is that lived experience, and I'm sure this is true for many of my colleagues. It's that lived experience that we hope allows us to do the job not just in the most effective way, but in the most compassionate way.
And I think we've seen that in your career. You've been commissioner of small business services. You've been commissioner for housing preservation and development. You spent time as VP of programs at the Ford Foundation. And you've also were the first woman to head up the Economic Development Corporation. And once again, first of two AAPI women to be deputy mayors. And I think often, while we've seen some traction and more folks, AAPI women getting into government and into elected office, we're still hearing many firsts. And when I introduce the panel shortly, you're going to hear a lot of firsts with those three elected officials. So what are some individual actions and systemic changes that we can take to make sure we develop and encourage more women to get into government and into legislative office?
Thank you for that question. It's true. I mean, for a lot of my career, being the first or the only that somewhat dominated the conversation, or too many spaces. I'm happy to report that that is, I do feel that there has been a change, but it's not fast enough, as you mentioned. So there are individual actions in my mind, and then also some real structural, systemic actions that we need to take so that these aren't individual moments or a step forward and 3 steps back, that this is just how we think about what it means to properly and effectively represent the people of this city. And so on the individual side, I take as a sacred duty the responsibility of lifting up, mentoring, identifying, hiring, promoting women of color, AAPI people. And so each of us in all of our roles has an opportunity to do that. It brings me a lot of joy to do that for, in particular, young people in this city and young AAPI professionals who may not have an easy entree into government or into other sectors, but I think that work has to be sustained. But as importantly, as the individual actions, it's really the systemic and structural work. And this is for API community, this is for women, these are for immigrants, it's for people who grew up in poverty. So what does that mean to really do this work on a systemic level? I think it means a few things. It means really shifting the narrative and making people and communities who formerly were not visible. It means building a strong analytical foundation to understand what the issues are that different communities are facing. It means ensuring not just the quantity and not just the speed, but the velocity of the discussions that need to take place so we actually understand and then tackle question challenges. And then finally, and I take this part seriously as a being in government, ensuring that we close the gap between the awareness of issues that AAPI leaders, AAPI communities face, the awareness of that, and the actions that are needed in order to really propel the work. So it has to be those 2 gears so that there are fewer and fewer first and onlys in the rooms that we inhabit across sectors.
Thanks for sharing that. So one last question. What would you like to be your legacy?
I'll start with that in many ways, my own story that I mentioned earlier, a legacy of not squandering those $200. And so for me, a lot of people might think that that is the legacy in the built environment. And I've certainly worked on a lot of projects across the city, from parks to mixed use housing, infrastructure. But that would be hollow for me, if at the end of this next tour that I'm on in government, if that didn't include real changes in policy for how we really uplift people, because I'm a big believer that no program can fix what policy over time has forged. And so that is critically important. And then finally, really it's about and I know we'll get this a lot. We hear this a lot from different leaders, is that it has to be about the people, not just the people whose lives we have improved, but then the people who are in the seats that we are. That I am in this seat makes no difference if I am the last person in it who is a woman of color, who is Asian American. And so that legacy of really building the next generation of public sector leaders and civic leaders who are as representative of the diversity and beauty of the city as possible, I hope I will have played a not insignificant part in that.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Wayne.
All right, be well. So thank you to the Deputy Mayor for joining us. And at this time, it's my pleasure to bring on our distinguished panelists. So we are being joined by Senator Ewen Chu, Senator Chu is the first Asian American and Asian American woman to be elected to the state Senate and to represent Brooklyn. She formerly was the chief of staff for Assemblymember Peter Abate Jr. Our second guest is Assemblymember Grace Lee. The Assembly member is the first Korean American and first Korean American woman elected to the state legislature. She was previously a community organizer. One example is co-founding Children First, which is a parent-led organization that was cleaning up the South Street Seaport. So thank you for joining us, Grace. And then last but definitely not least, we are joined by Assembly Member Jennifer Rajkumar, who is the first South Asian woman to be elected to the state legislature. Jennifer is chairing the Chamber's Subcommittee of Diversity and Law. And she was previously, she is a civil rights lawyer and was previously teaching. So welcome everyone to the panel. Thank you very much for joining us today as we continue to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month and recognizing the leadership of AAPI women. So I just want to note that right now the state Senate is having an education committee hearing that Senator Chu is part of. So Senator Chu can only join us for a portion of today's event. With that, given that she is in a hearing, I want to start off with the two Assembly members who are joining us today. As we all know, we are joined now by three firsts in the state legislature, and all of you have made groundbreaking history by joining the legislature. Now there's 12 Asian Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, that are serving in the state legislature, which is more than twice as much as we had in the previous session. So given both your roles, Grace and Jennifer, in the legislature, what do you think we can do to make sure that we encourage more AAPI women to run for political office? So how about we start with Assemblymember Lee?
Thanks, Wayne, so much. And just before I start, I also want to thank City and State for putting together this panel and always uplifting Asian American leaders, especially during the month of AAPI Heritage Month. The question is around how we get more AAPI women into government. And, I was telling Senator John Liu the other day, I'd really like to make sure that we get more young people into the pipeline of government. And he just kind of looks over at me and he says, well, first you're going to have to convince their parents that they shouldn't be lawyers or doctors, which is, for anyone who's Asian American, gives a little chuckle, because as you know, a lot of our government and politics is not a traditional path for immigrant families, particularly Asian Americans. And I really love what Congresswoman Grace Meng and Deputy Mayor Torres Springer said about, normalizing and welcoming in AAPI youth to get more involved in government. So, one way of doing that is absolutely to build a pipeline and to create opportunities for AAPI women to come into the sector. And that's one, directly by hiring into our offices and making sure that we, through our offices, represent the diversity of New York City, but also providing other opportunities like internships. And I, as a co-chair of the Asian Pacific American Task Force, I have been doing a lot of outreach to the interns who participated this year in the Assembly and Senate intern programs to make sure that they have access to us and they know that, they can reach out to us about their dreams and goals, and also to make sure that going forward, we have a strong pipeline of Asian American students who come through that internship program. And then, just from, being a woman and a mother, this is not necessarily an easy job to do. And I really want to commend our speaker, Carl Hastie, for helping to support women in government. We have a lot of support systems for women who have young children to be able to serve in the Assembly, and just continuing to be a voice to encourage women and to make sure that we get resources to be able to serve as well as have a family, I think is really important.
Great, thank you for that, Grace. Assemblymember Raj Kumar, same question to you. What can we do to encourage more AAPI women run for elected office and get into government positions?
Well, you are 500% correct, Wayne, that we are the first Asian women elected, but we must not be the last. And when I ran for this office, there was no Indian women elected to office anywhere in New York State. And so politically, people didn't know what box I fit in. So I simply created my own box. And as you know, I challenged an 11-year incumbent. And at the time, people said, Jennifer, you're a nice girl, but you got no shot. But in the end, not only did we win, we won by the largest margin of any challenger in the state, because no one can stop a determined Asian woman. And I know Assemblymember Lee and Senator Chu definitely agree with me when I say that. But when I ran, people actually didn't even know what the term South Asian even meant. And it was not even a term that was really being used. The year after I won, South Asian for the first time began being used in the New York City mayoral race as the candidates began to say it. But to your question, to develop a pipeline of more Asian women, I believe we must do a few things. First, we have to use the power of our example. I'm always so busy running around and running from here to there. But when I take a breath and stop and look around, I see that my mere presence in this role is something that young girls and young women are looking at. And they're observing it and taking it in with pride. And I know that seeing me is influencing their view of what's possible and their view of what they can do. So as Asian women electeds, I believe that we should hone that very powerful power of example to guide young women. Second, I believe that as women, we have to help each other. Because if we are ever going to have a woman president, or any women reaching the highest levels of office, if we are going to truly break the glass ceiling, then women need to help each other and seek to support one another. In other words, women should take each other seriously as real players. Because we are all now sitting together at that table of government. We are the women running things, and we have to be our best selves. So that means that we need to work with each other, build alliances with each other, debate each other, and really be the serious women in charge. It also means identifying talented young women, as Assemblymember Lee also spoke about, and bringing them up. We should arm them with all of the tools and lessons that we have already learned so that our daughters can do even better than we have done. And finally, I will say that as Asians, we exemplify excellence. An Indian kid wins the spelling bee every single year, and many from our community graduate at the top of their class. So now it's time for us to tell all Asian families to bring that excellence to American government and to encourage their kids to explore government service as an option. And of course, we, as the path-breaking elected officials, will be there to be their guides.
No, so I want to build off what you just said, Assemblymember Raj Kumar. So seeing themselves in government, and previously you were the director of immigration affairs for New York State. You've also been a civil rights lawyer. You were a fellow at the National Women's Law Center. So how do you think your previous experience in those roles led you to your role now as an assembly member?
Well, throughout my career, it has been a long journey of exploring different levers of social change. And that's one thing that I did that I think was very good and very effective, is that I kept exploring different ways to make a difference. So first, as a civil rights lawyer, I explored representing one individual at a time. For example, a domestic violence survivor or a worker who was not being paid a fair wage. And then I said, well, maybe we could make even bigger change if I represent a whole class of people. And that became an even bigger way to make a change. Then I realized if you really want to make a difference, you need power. So I did total 180 and I went into government. And I worked in Washington, D.C. at the National Women's Law Center exploring policy. And then I had an incredible opportunity to work for a governor of New York State and really learn how that kind of executive power worked. So now as an assembly member, I feel like there's so many tools and so many arrows in my quiver to draw from. But one thing that I think is important is that you have to be relentless, and you have to be kind of restless in your pursuit of what makes a change. And you have to kind of try to explore all the different levers of power. So because I have run around and done that so much, I feel that now as an assembly member, it gives me a lot of different tools to draw from.
No, so to build off of that, so Assemblymember Lee, we just heard Assemblymember Raj Kumar talk about being passionate and knowing how to pull levers of power. And you began your career in public service by co-founding Children First, dealing with the Mercury brownfield in the South Street Seaport, as well as fighting for better tenant protections and better rights in the Lower East Side. So what made you want to run for office?
Yeah, I think for a lot of the reasons that Assemblymember Raj Kumar talked about, really helping the community. My story starts as a mother with 3 young daughters. I've got a 5, 7, and 11-year-old, and a developer purchased a parking lot across from my daughter's school and applied the lot to the brownfield cleanup program and told the community, oh, don't worry, we're going to clean everything up. You're going to be fine. It turns out that that lot used to be the site of the largest thermometer factory in the country in the late 1800s, and the soil was deeply contaminated with mercury. And we have over 600 children going to school across the street from the lot. And if my fellow mom friends and I didn't intervene, we would have been in a position where our children could have been exposed to tons of chemicals, and it would have threatened their health and their life. So through that process of activating the community, organizing on the grassroots level, it was really ultimately about giving vulnerable populations within our city, our children, a voice that they themselves did not have. And I continued that work throughout throughout Lower Manhattan, helping Lower East Side deaf tenants living in Section 8 housing stand up to their building management and to demand repairs after being neglected and abused for years. And so through that community work, and I'm sure you know this very well, Wayne, you've been doing this in your life's work as well. Just the opportunity to give vulnerable people, marginalized people in our community, the opportunity to have a voice in government is what really drove me to want to run for office and to serve. And it's incredible to think about the scale now that I'm able to have as an elected official. I really did it to connect my own community and my own district that I represent with government services. But in the end, as an Asian American elected, one of the few, we've been able to do so much more for marginalized populations statewide. And so really proud to have led an effort along with Assemblymember Raj Kumar and Senator Chu to help get over $30 million for our API community-based organizations in this year's budget, a record amount of money to ever be seen by the API community, a huge commitment by our state. And want to thank our governor, our majority leader, and our speaker for making that commitment to the API communities this year. But without voices in government, that money never would have happened. And so there's this real opportunity now as API leaders in government to do more than just represent our communities, but to represent Asian Americans overall. And I think we're all stepping up to the challenge right now.
No, thank you for sharing your story, Grace. Really appreciate it. We are joined by Senator Ewen Chu, who I did introduce earlier. So, Senator, thanks for joining us. We know that it's a busy time for you with an education hearing that's been going on. So the Assembly members have had a chance to share how their previous experiences have led to them running for office. And for yourself, you were previously a journalist before you became Chief of Staff to Assemblymember Peter Abate Jr. And you have shared previously how being a journalist helped you tell stories and understand community issues that led you to bridge the gap between Asian American immigrant communities and government. So could you share with us why you chose to run for office?
Sure. Thank you, Wayne, and apologize for being late. Yes, I was in the education committee. It's still going on. I just so I later I need to pop back in, but I do appreciate this opportunity to get to talk about how Asian and women can be in our government. It's to bring out representation. So I'm happy to see my colleague here, Assemblywoman Grace Lee, Assemblywoman Jennifer Rajkumar. And I know earlier we have Congresswoman Grace Meng. Like here, this is the year we bring out our representation. This is the quota. Regarding why I joined this to be the first Asian woman guy elected to the state senate. This is actually a very unexpected result for my career and journey to come here. I was an international student and I came here to study sociology for my master's degree. New York is a very diverse society. That's why this is the best place for me in my life scoping how I want to pursue in sociology. And then later on, I realized there were a lot of issues and hardship when immigrant family, they're facing it. When you become an immigrant, you need to relearn the social system, justice system, education system, healthcare system. How do you actually survive? Unfortunately, we need to use this term, survive. In a new country, how do you settle and provide for your family? And that's how when I start become a journalist in a community, I saw those stories firsthand. And then when I was a journalist, when I was a reporter, you want to offer the help because luckily I have the language capacity to offer help, to finding resource. I can shift those information to those family who needs them. But sometimes I do get questioned by those victim or family. They'll be like, why you want to help me? Are you after me for a story? That was totally not my intention. I just want to be a better help. And that's the moment I realized like, I can find, being a journalist, I can identify issues, but I'm not in a position to provide solutions or answers. And that's how I started to join Assembly members' office to provide as a help and a partner to help him serve our community. And last year, because we had this opportunity redistricting, create Asian majority Senate district in Southern Brooklyn, because we saw a 40% population grow specific in our AAPI community. And that's how I see myself and to be a better supporter in a greater and larger scale, because this district covers it covers the assembly members district where I used to serve in the past 10 years, and then go beyond this, it just expand more. So, and in this district, we have 50% Asian families. I have 20% Latino families in this community. And I believe I represent the largest Muslim Arabic community in New York City, if not New York State. So we're saying this district, Senate District 17, is heavily immigrant oriented. That's where the need is. Even our language are different, our needs are the same. So for me, that's the opportunity I see myself like, I can do more. And I believe this is all our, like Grace and Jennifer, we all have this goal. If we have the capacity and ability to do more, why not? Let's jump in, let's run, let's see if we can help provide and address more issues. And that's the moment I decided to jump in, and I appreciate my constituent give me this opportunity. And like Grace say, this year we finally have this opportunity to provide to secure a 30 million state budget for our AAPI communities. Our AAPI community being historically overlooked, underserved, underfunded, underrepresented in many ways. So this is not enough. I'm not saying this is enough, but I'm saying this is a beginning of a recognition of our needs. And I'm happy to see this result. And we know, Grace and I, we know we're gonna fight for more. And with all the elected officials' help and the governor's help, we believe we can achieve more in the future.
Yes, and thank you for championing that. I know both of you championed it. Assemblymember Lee and Senator Chu were the champions of that initiative, the AAPI equity budget, and then all of you were mobilizing and working in lockstep with the other API legislators, of course, including Assemblymember Raj Kumar. So thank you for that. Obviously, we know there's been a rise in anti-Asian hate. We know that the economic impacts of COVID impacted the Asian American community earlier than the March 2020 lockdown. And then we saw the devastation with the highest unemployment rates, for example, during the pandemic. So it was just not just public health issues, but economic and anti-Asian and bias issues. So in addition to the AAPI equity budget at $30 million, I know all of you have been doing some other work, including some other legislation around API curriculum and other areas. So I just want to start with you, Assemblymember Lee, because I know you're the sponsor of some of those bills. Can you just share with us some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so thanks, Wayne, for that question. I am working on a couple bills right now, specifically for the API communities. One is a bill that I am sponsoring with Senator John Liu. It's the AAPI History Bill, which would mandate that Asian American history be incorporated into history curriculums across New York State public schools. And why we think this is so important is because, especially during the pandemic, we saw how the perspective of Asians is, as Asian Americans, we are othered, we are continually seen as foreigners, while our past, our history in the United States is over a century long. And so it's really important for people statewide, not just Asian Americans, but for all of our communities to understand our past, our contributions to the American story, and to be recognized as part of the American story. So that is something that we're fighting very hard for. I think, we think about how do we address hate? And one of the ways to do that is through education. And so making sure that we educate people about our history and our culture is really important. And it's also why I am sponsoring another bill to call for Lunar New Year to be a state holiday. Lunar New Year is one of, if not the most significant holidays for Asian American communities. I don't want to overstep on Diwali because I know that's an important one for Assembly Rajkumar, but also, but Lunar New Year is one that's celebrated by millions of Asian Americans, and right here in New York State as well, and want to make sure that our culture and history is recognized and acknowledged for that. This past year, we had the Lunar New Year fall on a Sunday. And because of that, we were not given a formal holiday for school or work. And so a lot of people had to make a choice between sending their children to school or being able to celebrate with their families, the most important holiday of the year. And so, with the Lunar New Year bill, we would be able to actually allow people to take the day off without any penalties, no absences from schools, no, losing, work hours as well. So we'd like to see that go through as well.
Oh yeah, thanks for championing those. And Assemblymember Raj Kumar, I think we've already heard, or there's an acknowledgement or a mention of Diwali as an important holiday. I think a lot of times when people talk about AAPIs, they are thinking more about East Asians, and you've already mentioned that folks actually talking now about South Asians. So could you share one or two of your legislative priorities looking out for the South Asian community?
Absolutely. I think it's a pivotal moment for us. And I'd say that we are Pan-Asian. And I was so proud to be a part of helping to make Lunar New Year a New York City school holiday, which finally happened after so many years of advocacy. I know Congressmember Grace Meng was such a big advocate for that. And now we are on the verge of making Diwali a school holiday in New York City as well. And that movement has more momentum than it ever has. For over 20 years, the Asian community has been fighting for Diwali to be a school holiday. And then this past year, we got the support of the mayor of City of New York, Eric Adams, as well as the entire New York City City Council, which all voted to support my bill to make Diwali a school holiday. And the bill has moved through the Senate New York City Education Committee, which is a huge step. So we see the bill actually moving to make Diwali a school holiday in New York City schools. This is such a major issue. What it is about is recognition. 200,000 Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Jains in New York City are seeking to be recognized. They want the government to show that they are seen. And so that's what this movement is about. I have also reintroduced another very special piece of legislation. And that's a bill that I have with Senator Cooney to create the first ever Asian American Commission in New York State. Many other states have already set up Asian American commissions. And I think that it's time for New York State, because we are a national leader, to do the same. And a commission would be so powerful, because what it would do is streamline services for the Asian American community, and to really make sure that our state government is doing all it can across all of its agencies to lift up the Asian American community. So we began the movement to create that commission last year. It got through both houses, but was vetoed. But I know that the governor is very interested in working with legislators now to make sure that our bills make it all the way to the finish line. And I'm so looking forward to that happening soon.
Thank you, both of you, for sharing your legislative priorities and obviously the communities behind you. So Senator Chu, what do you think we could do to make sure that we encourage more AAPI women to run for office or to get into government positions?
So first thing is build a platform. We're happy to be here. We have another two amazing Asian women leaders in politics. We all want to do is encourage our next generation. We have a platform here. We need to do every way we can to support our young one. They need to be more civilly engaged. We have the platform for them. They want to come. Like I'm proud to say I have 8 staff on my team, and 6 of them, they're young women. It's not specific intention to go this way, but when you go through the resume, when you do the hiring process, women are very talented. They get things done. So there's no bias, but it just happened. My team are functionally very well, and they can help serve our community. So what we need to do is encourage more, give them the opportunity, give them the platform. And also, we are not just Asian legislature, we're also women legislature. So we need to bring more awareness and women related to state policy. I know my colleagues like Grace and Jennifer talk about the Asian perspective, the legislation they're working on. I'm currently working on the woman issue. I just got my first bill passed in the state senate last Wednesday. Or Tuesday, I forgot. It's to require non-public school need to provide a free menstrual product. So our student will not, because of any reason, to miss the class or need to face those stigmatism. And the second thing, I have legislation to make sure our state government, when they have a contract with any work for a state contract, those providers need to have breast cancer screening requirement. We need to bring this to awareness, like when they doing state work or our state legislation policy will also reflect. We address the need and perspective from a woman issue and the woman, so that our 50% of the population in this society also they can feel they've been addressed, they've been seen. It's about representation. So I'm happy to be the one to introduce those bills. And I also have one, it's about the NWBE, try to cut down the red tape. So they encourage them to do more state contract with nonprofit organization, which Wayne, I know you run the CPC very well, provide day-to-day service to thousands of people. So I really appreciate how our nonprofit organization pick up those hard work to take care of our family. So it's our position to see any support we can give to help our small business can grow back, and also our nonprofit organization can get help. So.
No, thank you for sharing those priorities. And we have a few minutes left for this webinar. So the last question I have for each of you is, what would you like your legacy in elected office to be? So I will start with Assembly Member Lee.
Wow, that's a big one. I, especially being in my first year of office, but you know, I'm a mother of 3 young Asian daughters, and my legacy are my children. And I want, with my work, to demonstrate to them that they can be whoever they want to be, no matter whether they see people like them in the roles that they pursue, that they can be the first of something and they can succeed. But along with that, knowing that giving them the confidence to do whatever they want to achieve, making sure that they, in their jobs, whatever that is, in their careers, that they have a true commitment to service, and making sure that they are continuing to serve the community and uplift those who may not have a voice. And so, you know, through my role in government, it's a huge sacrifice for my family. I have to say, you know, for all of us here on this panel, you know, we spend half of our years in Albany, but you know, it's done with the purpose and the goal of, you know, making New York better and making our future better for future generations. And I hope that I can instill that sense of community service, public service to my children.
Great, thank you, Grace. Same question. I'll go over to Senator Chu because I know you still have a hearing going on. So, Senator.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So my legacy, that's very easy. I want to see more women. I want to see more Asian. I want to see them thrive. They want to take public office. They should. They want to success in every way they can. They should. If you're immigrants like myself, I came here age 27, never thought about one day I'm going to become a New York State Senator. You can. I want to be the role model to show them, to prove to them, you work hard, you can go wherever you want. Don't say you break the ceiling. Think about there's no ceiling, there's no cap. Go bigger, dream bigger. So I would like to provide more platform for a young woman, for more Asian, and many more for our immigrant community. Like, you actually can achieve everything you can. You just need to go believe yourself and go pursue. And that, if I can successfully make that happen, that's a real legacy.
Great, thank you, Ewan. And last but not least, same question to you, Assemblymember Raj Kumar. What would you like your legacy to be?
Well, one day there's going to be a young lady sitting here on this panel with you, Wayne. And if anything that I do today can inspire that young lady or make her path easier or make her believe in herself that she can be great, if anything that I do makes that happen, then I have left a legacy that I will be proud of.
I think that's a perfect way for us to end this panel. So thank you again to 3 extraordinary leaders who are all path breakers and the first among in their areas. So again, thank you very much to Senator Chu, Assemblymember Raj Kumar, and Assemblymember Lee for joining us today for this panel. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for the AAPI Women in Government webinar that's being hosted by City and State, as well as Charter Communications. Thank you for their support. I also, once again, would like to thank Congresswoman Grace Meng, Deputy Mayor Taurus Springer, Senator Chu, Assemblymember Lee, and Assemblymember Raj Kumar for joining us today. And thank you to all of you as our guests. We hope that you continue to stay involved with City and State. So please join future events with City and State and come on out throughout the month of May. There's plenty of AAPI Heritage Month events around the 5 boroughs. So please come out to those events as well as those on Long Island and upstate New York. Thank you very much and have a great weekend.